Okay, recording is started. Welcome back to the study hall for February 18th. We're going to do some more critical reasoning with defining goals. So these are mostly problems that have blanks in the question statement or in the paragraph somewhere. So where the blank forces you to actually specifically define the goal in terms of particulars, which is actually what you should be doing anyway. But here it's made even more explicit by the presence of the blanks in the problems. So again, copyright notice, there you go. These are all from the free GMAT prep software, which is copyright GMAC. So, and once again, in terms of submissions, the free problems are what we use. We can't use problems from the paid materials. Can't use the OGs. Can't use anything whose name ends with PAC. All right. Here is, and don't forget where you find those multiple choice answers. There they are. All right, let's do a problem. How about that one right there? And here is, again, here's where your multiple choice answers are found. And I'll give you a little bit of time to do that problem. Go for it. Okay, let's see. We should probably be picking a thing here pretty soon. Remember the way this test works. You can't not pick an answer. If you're not familiar with the format, you have to pick a choice before you move on. So there's no going back. There's no leaving things blank. There's no revisiting problems. You get one crack at everything. So, okay, let's take a guess. London 16, Noel, Phenom, should pick an answer to this thing. Okay. So we've got at least one person picking every answer, but the two that are getting the most people picking them are these two. So these two, boy and dog. But there is at least one person who's picked every choice. So let's take a look. So again, I mean, where we should look first with any of these problems is generally this part of the question, right? The part that actually tells you what you're supposed to be doing. So Antoine's got some text in the text box. Antoine, you got a question. Yeah, when people say STEM, does that, I never know what people mean when they say that, because I feel like half the time people use that to mean that part, and then I feel like half the time they use it to mean the paragraph part, and I'm not real sure what people mean by that, but it's kind of the problem with terminology in general, is that it just kind of makes things more complicated than they have to be. But right, I mean, you think about it, like when you deal with these problems, okay, because like imagine that you were on a jury and they threw a bunch of documents at you and they were like, here, look at all these documents, and they gave you like 20 documents to look at, and then only after all of that did they say, oh, by the way, this is a fraud case. I mean, you'd be really confused while they were showing you all those documents, right? You'd be like, why are you showing me all these things? I have no idea what to look for. I mean, this is the same thing, right? Like when in critical reasoning in general, you wouldn't want to read the random facts first because you would have no idea what you're supposed to do with them. So like in general, it's good practice to always read this first. So because that's the part that actually says what you're supposed to do. And then you go and in light of that, because especially with a lot of the longer questions, there's a focus that's actually stated in the context of the question too. Like a lot of the time the question will say something like, which of these will affect profits? And then you'll know right there that you're only thinking about dollars and cents and profits, you know, costs and expenses and stuff. So, and then you can ignore anything that's not those things. And had you read all the stuff first, you might have wasted a bunch of time reading stuff that you're supposed to ignore, right? So in general, you should read this part first. I mean, sometimes it'll be written in really generic terms and you won't really gain from it, but there's never anything to lose by reading this part first. So good practice, read the question part first. Because the point there is it gives you a goal. And then it also often narrows the focus of your reading as well. So here, I mean, what we want to do is this. We want to argue that doing something would fail to have some effect. So the problem with these words is we don't really know what they mean. So now we know at least what we want when we read the problem now. Like we know that there has to be a goal, and then there's a plan, and the plan is supposed to fail to achieve that. So this gives us stuff to read for in the passage, which sounds really obvious, like you have to have something to read for, but a lot of the time people are just reading without really having a goal. So what's the goal? And then also, how are we trying to achieve it? Is the other question at hand. So, what are we doing to try to achieve it? And then we want to know that it's going to fail. Sure. Okay. So let's check it out. So we've got, for 5 years, you have this restaurant chain. It's been growing. Primarily, blah, blah, blah. We can go back and look at that if we need to. But the goal, okay, goal is this. Continued sales growth is the goal. Continued sales growth. And then what are we going to do to try to achieve it? We're going to try to open more new restaurants. That's what we're going to try to do. Open new places. Okay. And then, so, like, why has it been working so far? Because the deal is, we want to know why this is going to fail, right? And I mean, so far this has been working. So no matter what the choices say, we need some reason why a plan that has been working so far is going to not work anymore. So why has this plan been working so far? And so then, why might this not keep happening? I mean, this is all just, this is not some, special critical reasoning technique or anything like that. This is basically just common sense, right? Like if you think about it, it's whatever we've been doing has totally been working. And we are going to keep doing exactly the same thing that we've been doing, because that's what we've already been doing, is opening new restaurants, and we want to just keep doing it and change nothing. So, I mean, this means we've got a pretty good idea of what the answer to this question is going to have to do. It's going to have to basically take something that has let this strategy work so far and flip it on its head. So Okay. We didn't even have to look at the choices yet. I mean, again, with critical reasoning in general, the other thing is if you are not going into the answer choices with a pretty solid idea of what a correct and incorrect answer have to do, then that means you definitely should have done more work on the upfront end of this. So, why has the plan been working so far? Somebody tell me. Yeah, the plan's been working by like poaching customers away from other restaurants, right? So that's what it tells you in the top paragraph. So far, the growth has come from stealing customers from existing restaurants. Absolutely, yes, it has. Sure. So if you think about this, I mean, you can actually tell a lot, right? I mean, what has to be, like, what has to be in the areas where we want to put these restaurants? Yeah, we need other restaurants, number one. And also, we should not also have one of our own, right? Because that's, I mean, that also sounds like common sense, but yeah, because there's a lot of other kinds of businesses that you can go ahead and throw up in an area where they already exist. I mean, like one Starbucks in an area with another Starbucks, you see that all the time. So, but sure, right? So, like, this means that good areas for this strategy have those two qualities. Or, like, most importantly, they have to have other restaurants, but also they have to have not our restaurants already. Okay. So, like, something, as long as these things are still true, the point is our strategy should totally still work. I mean, if these things still obtain, then there's no reason why the strategy should fail. So basically, the correct answer should be something like, these are not true anymore. It should be some form of, these are no longer true. I mean, actually, what you can do with these problems, for the most part, is you can actually do pretty well by trying to do these problems without even having multiple choice answers at first, just to see how well to see how accurate you can get with this before having choices. You can get something like that, right? So these things shouldn't be true anymore. At times when they find a restaurant is too crowded, they go to other restaurants nearby. This is already existing restaurants, so it has not much to do with the plan to open new ones, really. I mean, and if anything, if A is true, then this might make us think that our plan will succeed fantastically well. Because, I mean, A might make us think that even if we already have restaurants somewhere, then we can still support others. So that's kind of cool. Right. A is not a reason to think that anybody will fail. Yeah. If anything, A will make us think that success will happen anywhere, even where we already have restaurants. So that's not good. I mean, we want a reason why something would fail. So A is the wrong way answer. B says the Super chain has generally opened new restaurants in locations that have lots of other restaurants already. Does that help us? Yeah, it doesn't help us because it's something that we kind of already knew. And it's not about the future, right? So Because, I mean, first of all, this is just a past data point. So this gives us no basis on which to make predictions. Because this problem is about making predictions. So first of all, you can eliminate it on these grounds alone. I mean, this is what we have done. Well, that's great, but nothing about the future. But also, you know, this is exactly what we would expect anyway, given how our plan works. I mean, you know, because the plan means that we need to steal customers from other restaurants. So this answer choice just says that so far we have basically made really intelligent choices of where to open these places, right? I mean, like, in fact, if B said something like this, the chain has generally opened restaurants that in locations that don't have a lot of existing restaurants, that would be, you know, that would be meaningful in some sense, because at least it would mean that there would be even greater likelihood of success. But that would still be a wrong way answer in that case, because you want failure. But this answer choice, the way it's written right now, doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you that so far we've opened restaurants in places that are good for this plan. Okay, great. So far we have done that. But that tells us nothing about what will happen in the future. But again, just keep in mind, right? Focus on the goal. We want a reason why this will not continue to happen. Future, we need that. I mean, several people picked this choice. So just keep focus in mind when you're looking for that, when you're going shopping for an answer choice. C, we just don't know. I think one person had C and then switched to something else. I mean, the smaller variety of foods says nothing about restaurant success because there's nothing in here to go on about that. Like we don't have, there's nothing about variety in this problem at all. I mean, if we had information about customers wanting variety or not wanting variety or so on, then sure, but otherwise, no. Aha, D. Virtually all the new sites, so here's your future right there, potential sites for new restaurants. So all the places where they're thinking about opening stuff in the future are already located where there are existing restaurants of our company. There you go. This means that we're already stealing restaurants, or we're already stealing customers from these restaurants. I mean, it doesn't disprove that the plan would work. I mean, you might have so many surplus customers in these areas that you might still be able to support a second super restaurant. But remember that in these problems where you have to weaken stuff or strengthen stuff, you're not trying to prove or disprove things. Like in terms of which way does this go, this definitely goes in against the plan direction, because this means that a bunch of the clientele that we're trying to pick up is already taken care of. And so the restaurants might just wind up fighting each other for clients. And then E is about cost, which cost is also not really discussed as a factor here. We don't really know about price sensitivity. But also, we come out ahead anyway. So there's double problem there. First of all, we don't know if price is an issue. And even if it is, super looks good on this issue. Like, there's no way this could be against the plan, basically. Like, either this is neutral if price is a non-issue, or it is actually an advantage if price is an issue. So no matter what, this is not a disadvantage. And on top of all those things, this is something that has always been true and shows no signs of changing either. So this is at least like triple bad choice. Any questions about this? And again, make sure you notice all this legwork that we can do up front. Like all of this that's here we basically did without even looking at the answer choices. Like we figured out, okay, here's the goal. Then once we had that, we actually came up with all this stuff about why has the plan been working and what can make it stop working. And we had the entire possibilities for this answer choice narrowed down to this sort of thing. I mean, in general, the question is if you have things talking about the past. I mean, if you're trying to make a rule out of this that you're going to memorize, then don't ever do that. I mean, don't ever try to make rules in critical reasoning because you can't do that. But in general, the past is not predictive of the future unless there are good reasons why it would be. Yeah, like if it's, you might have a situation where the past could, where things are going to change only very slowly if they do change. Like, the problem gives you reason to believe that changes will be slow or that conditions remain stable for a while, then the past could totally predict the future. Sure. You just got to take each situation individually. But, I mean, if you're asking that for the purposes of trying to make a rule or something, then just that's not ever a thing that you want to try to do. Yeah, correct answer is D, dog. D like dog. Okay. Looks like no one else is typing. Let's get another problem. How about this one? What about that one right there? Go for it. Okay, let's pick a thing here pretty soon. Yeah, when the problem's on the board, there's not sound. no, silence. That's cute. All right, let's see. Aisha just picked a choice. Eris, Ashtor, Nina, NL, Olusei. All right, let's take a thing. Okay, I mean, again, if you want to enumerate steps that you should do, then you can always do something like that. But whenever you have sort of vague words like this in a problem, like it's okay. If you think about conversations, when people say stuff like this, like whenever people say stuff like, okay, these guys are not going to achieve their goal or something like that. Like whenever people say stuff like that, it's always understood exactly what that means. Like there's never any doubt as to exactly what the goal is and exactly what the context is and precisely what the boundaries are around it and so on. So like if there's ever any sort of doubt there, then it's clarified. People will ask. They'll be like, wait, what goal? Huh? Right? So that's what I think. So what is the goal? So when you see vague, if the question contains these kinds of vague words like this, like vague, like goal or plan or proposal or anything like that, you should just clarify, right? Always translate into specifics of the problem. Absolutely. Like stuff from the passage. I mean, this is why you want to read this before you go into the paragraph here, because you want to have an aim while you read the paragraph. You want to have a purpose for why you're reading that paragraph in the first place, and this gives you a purpose, right? So translate into specifics, and then once you've done that, then like think about brainstorm, and like think about specifically, like think about what would affect the situation, and then try as best you can to predict the answer as specifically as possible. And only then should you really even think about looking at the choices. And if you have a way of, like, you'll know personally if you have this way of being led astray by answer choices, or kind of being led down the path by answer choices where you shouldn't really be going. But if you have that tendency, then if necessary, just write down your prediction, right? Just if necessary, actually write down the standard you come up with for the choices. But just write it down. Like a correct answer choice should do this kind of thing. So, Lynn, you wrote in the chat box that means something works. I think I didn't see exactly when you wrote that, so I don't know exactly what the context of that is. But maybe you can say. Okay, like here, using the film could help these people achieve their goal, right? So when you read in the paragraph, we want to say, like, what is this goal? So, and then what's their evidence or reason why they want to do that? So, okay. And I mean, if it's me, what I like to do is I like to go through and find what the goals or plans or proposals and stuff are first, before reading through from top to bottom, just because I don't have as much of an attention span as most people do, and most importantly, I don't have that kind of memory. So if I read through all of this kind of stuff, I'm not really going to remember what it says. But if I can see what this goal is, and I know exactly why I'm reading this stuff, exactly when I'm reading it, then I've got a better sense of that, right? So achieving the goal. So generally it's found towards the end, but we might have to scroll back till we see it, right? But what is the goal? There's the goal, right? And if you see this, the words that clue you into that here are in order to blah, 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 right? So the goal is that. So the goal is reduced maintenance time. So right away, we know we are only talking about time. I mean, this is why you want to do this before you read that whole paragraph, because now anything that doesn't have directly to do with time is gone. Yep. In fact, all right. The goal is to reduce the amount of time spent on maintenance. You know what you might want to do right now? I mean, we might just want to like go to the answer choices and see which answer choices have anything to do with that. Let's just do that. Let's just see which answer choices have anything to do with time. I mean, you never know, right? Making a home run like that. This is about color tones. This has nothing to do with time. I mean, you know, color, hue, tones are not really time related. I mean, here, this is about film being able to move much more quickly. So efficiency, that's definitely a time issue. Time savings. Well, that's relevant. Sure. C says you have to be really skilled and trained to apply it, but that has nothing to do with how long it takes. That just means you have to train people to do it, but it doesn't mean that it's fast or slow. D says that it can be protected from certain kinds of pollution and stuff, but that has nothing to do with time spent on maintenance. And E says that you can fly the plane really fast and it's not going to peel off. But that has nothing really to do with time. So there's only one choice that has anything to do with time. And that's be like boy. So yeah. What if the film doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? What if it does? What are you? What do you mean by that? I mean, because like when you look at these questions, one thing you have to do is you have to get rid of possibilities that are not reasonable possibilities. Like if you actually have airline officials considering this stuff as an alternative to paint, then it doesn't work is not going to be thrown out there as some kind of thing. I mean, none of these choices are going to depend on that anyway, because that really shouldn't affect anything. But you're not going to have to consider things like that. I mean, if it's being considered as an alternative, then it's going to be a viable alternative in some sort of sense. But in terms of E, also remember what they're not going to do. They're not going to make answer choices that are good but not as good, right? In general, if you have to weaken something, then every answer choice that's wrong should either do nothing or should strengthen it. And if you have to strengthen something, then every answer choice that's wrong should either do nothing or weaken it. So like if you are talking about choice E, then choice E is saying the film does a really good job. I mean, this is not, you know, like if they were saying the film tore off at certain speeds, then you could maybe make a case that that would add to maintenance time because they would have to like paint it back on after it tore off, right? But this says the opposite of that. This says that it's not going to come off even if you fly the plane really crazy fast. So if anything, this shows that it's basically a nothing choice. It's going to not affect anything either way. It's just going to stay on there, just like paint would, because paint doesn't peel off at super high speeds either. So it should be the. I mean, it doesn't explicitly say that, but it also doesn't say that it can't. And if it's being considered as an alternative, then we should. I mean, remember, you got to make the most reasonable interpretations of these things. So, like, if you heard that the State Highway Administration of California was considering using some synthetic surface instead of asphalt for highways, then you would just read that as, okay, well, they must have done some basic testing on this stuff already and verified that it is a reasonable road surface. Like, if you even read that in the newspaper at all, if you read there was like, State Highway Administration is considering this stuff to replace the current road surface, then already you would know that it was a decent road surface. Like the possibility that it was totally not a thing would be off the table. So, because it wouldn't even get to the point of being an alternative already. Yeah, it's like same thing when you read this. If you even get to the point where officials are considering it, then it's not going to be a thing that totally doesn't work. That's just not a reasonable interpretation. So if they say nothing about it, then you would go with the common sense interpretation, which is it's going to be a thing. In terms of difficulties, there's never any good productive reason to think about that. People who are asking about that, always useless to think about that. In fact, always worse than useless, because I mean, if you think about it, the fact that you're asking that question is proof that it's useless to ask it, because you will never know that at all. So it is totally and utterly pointless to think about that. And if you think about it, then you just have less brain power to focus on solving the problem. So yeah, don't think about those things. Those are not useful to think about. Okay, but yeah, if you just realize the goal here is time savings, then we're already finished. It's B, because the other ones have nothing to do with anything. If you want, you can read the rest of the paragraph. They have to spend some time on maintenance and stuff, and that's when they do the paint. So, blah, 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 that doesn't really help us. But yeah, this is it. Time. Time is the goal. So that, specifics of the problem. There it is. Specifics are time. In this case. In this case, it's all you got to do. It's pretty neat. Alrighty. Any other questions about this specific problem? Fire away. If not, let's do another one. Let's do one. So that's be like boy. Okay. How about, let's do this one. This one's got a lot of words in it. The difficulty level is it doesn't matter. And it never matters to think about that, and you are wasting your time and effort by thinking about it at all. In fact, that's the best case scenario. The best case scenario is it's useless to think about that. The more likely scenario is you'll do worse if you think about that, because you'll have less brain power to think about the problem. So, I mean, also things like question types. I mean, if you, question types and stuff like that are also only things you should think about as backups if you don't really understand. Because like if you understand what they are asking you in plain English, then I mean, like, okay, like the thing you got to understand about critical reasoning is that critical reasoning is basically regular everyday human reasoning in the form of annoying formal text, right? Like with critical reasoning in general, plan A should be just read the question, understand what it's asking you, and do it. If you can do this, you should just do it. Plan B should be absolutely everything involving strategies and question types and anything else that can be printed in a book. I mean, because really, this is stuff that, at the end of the day, this is stuff that you can't really make methodical. So anything that you see in a book is going to be an approximation of the kind of reasoning that you need, but only an approximation. So, I mean, if you can read this and you understand that that's what it means, that it means, okay, the goal is to save time, and I want to know something else that will also help me save time. I mean, there's nothing to gain by thinking about question types there, and there's actually a lot to lose, because, you know, right now you've got this exact understanding of exactly what the question is, and thinking about question types will only make that less exact and more vague. So those are not things to think about unless you are genuinely confused as to what the test item is asking you to do. If that happens, then you start thinking about all those things, but not unless and until. I mean, plan A is this. The only reason you see the stuff that you do in books and so forth is because you can't quantify how to do plan A here. If you could, that would be artificial intelligence, and you would be very rich if you could do that. But, yeah. Okay, let's do this problem. There's a lot of words, so it'll probably take you longer than others. But give it a shot. Don't forget where you have multiple choice answers. Multiple choice answers are there. All right, give it a shot. Okay, let's pick a thing pretty soon. Pretty soon. Maybe take another 20 or 30 seconds, maybe. Alrighty, let's see. If you are Arti or Abhirami or Ashtor, Nina, Rai, you should pick a thing. Remember, in general, if you're one of the last few to answer the question, then you are also one of the few people in which I'm most interested in your answer, because usually those last few people to pick answers are the ones that are sort of on the bubble as far as understanding and stuff goes. But remember, you can't not answer stuff on this exam. Okay, people. Remember where the multiple choice answers are? They're here, underneath your name. You'll find the letter A underneath your name to the right. You can click on it, and then you'll see a pull-down menu of choices. So the point is to not answer it in the chat box. So, fine, your name will be somewhere. If you see the word participants, you might have to expand. There you go. You found it. Okay, gotcha. All right. So most people are picking either. No problem. Most people are picking either A or C. Although, okay, Ashton, you see where the multiple choice answers are, right? That's where we just indicated those. You might have to look at, you might have to find the word participants somewhere on your screen. You might have to click the word participants and expand that part of the window. And then if you do, then you'll see your name, and then you'll find this underneath there. But if you click that, then you'll see the multiple choice options under there. But okay. All right, so most people are picking either A, alligator, or C, cat. But here, let's talk about it. So we've got at least one person picking each other choice, but most of the A's and C's. Okay. So again, here's our vague words. I mean, whenever we see vague words in the question, we want to first define what the heck that is, right? So we should do first. We're going to define, like, what is the contention? Then brainstorm. Then read what would affect it, what's happening. Then brainstorm what would affect it. And then make a prediction. Okay. So the contention, in fact, they even use the word contend, again, in the passage. I mean, again, they really, one thing they do not do in these problems where you have to strengthen or weaken things like plans or anything like that, they definitely don't do tricky things with words. I mean, like if they use the word proposal, then a lot of the times they'll even use the word propose in the passage. Like here they've got the word contention and then they use the word contend. I mean, they really go out of their way to not be tricky with this stuff. It's kind of cool. So the contention is that making some sort of, if you look at the stuff, it's cell service, right? So their contention is that making cell service available to farmers will generate profit. So that's the contention. So if you think about it, I mean, it must be something that on the face of it looks like it's not going to be profitable. Because otherwise there would not even be anything to write a question about here. So the contention is that offering cell phone service to a certain group of farmers will be profitable. Okay. So we should expect that it's going to not seem profitable, because otherwise this would not be an interesting problem at all. Probably doesn't seem profitable. Sure. Okay, let's read the paragraph. So isolated areas, there'll have to be considerable investment, so it's going to be high cost. That seems to weigh against profit because it's geographically isolated. And this is unavoidable. You're not going to make that go down. And the only significant economic activity is small-scale coffee farming. And right now, they cannot afford the fees. Right now. So there's high costs that are unavoidable, and right now, revenues wouldn't make up for it. Okay, I mean, so profits are revenues minus costs, right? So what is, and notice that this is stated with absolutely no uncertainty about the cost. It will require considerable investment to install the capital that you have to install to give these people service. So, okay. What's the only way that this situation could change? Like right now, profits are negative. I mean, theoretically, there would be two ways, which would be for the cost part of that to go down, or for the revenue part to go up. But again, considering what we've been told, Antoine, but who's going to pay the service fees? Maybe depending on right? If some way of the farmers, right? Because okay, right now. Yeah, the farmer's revenue, the farmer's income isn't high enough to cover the costs. So what could change? Like how could this become profitable? Well, there's really, mathematically speaking, there's only two ways, which are costs could go down, or profit could go up, or revenue could go up, which could be farmers' money. And we've already kind of ruled out costs going down, right? Like if you, costs are not going to go down because they have to get this stuff into a geographically isolated part of the country, and that's not really going to become less costly. But if the revenue goes up, then they might be able to afford these service fees. Sure. So it's going to have to be something that will allow the farmers to pay the fee. If they, Nina, not really seeing what you're saying there, because like if they give the farmers free equipment, then that means that that's even less revenue that they're making. So that would actually, this would actually work against profits. I mean, like, this would actually go the other way, unless I'm reading the words the wrong way. Unless you mean something else that you're not saying when you write this, but this would actually go the wrong way. Because providing any sort of equipment for free is actually a cost to the company, because the company has to pay for that equipment, and then if they're turning around and giving it to them. So, yeah. Okay. So let's check it out, right? I mean, it's got to be something where the revenue goes up. And then, right, Karishma makes this point of, would they even subscribe to these phones? So ideally, it should be a way for their revenue to go up that is tied to having these phones, right? So that's even better. So we can make all these predictions before we even get to the choices, right? Absolutely, right? So as far as prediction goes, we want some way, we want some reason to believe that farmers will make more money in a way that's tied to phone service. So, like, in other words, a way where they have to keep having the phone service in order to have that money. So that would cover that issue that Karishma is raising as well. So, avoid their services. To afford the service. Yeah, so basically the same thing we're saying, right? So if there's a way to, yeah, and again, it should ideally be a way that the phones themselves will allow that to happen. Because otherwise we would have no reason to think that they would spend the money on phones. So that's what we want. We want increased revenue. And so, like, here's what you might want to write down on the paper, just to remind yourself. Write down increased revenue, increased farm revenue tied to phones. Because having this written down in the paper will definitely help you stay focused on it, because it's very easy to just drift off of this. You'd be surprised, right? So, okay, increased farm revenue coming from phones. Well, what does A say? Currently, right now, the coffee farmers have to sell the coffee at whatever price the buyers dictate. So we can take that to mean unfairly low prices, because they cannot remain in contact with higher bidders. So this is, you know where they're going with this, right? Like, contact, the implication here is that if they had means of communication, if they had these telephones, then they could contact the higher bidders. Telephones would provide a means of contacting higher bidders for the product. So this does, right? If you talk about the requirements that we have here, this totally ties in increased farm revenue with phones. This is precisely what we want. So this is great. I mean, if you've got that much of a hit, you might not even want to read the rest of the choices, but if we check them anyway. So here, this is going to be a choice that we want. But the other thing, and the thing that's good about this critical reasoning stuff, is that the answers that are wrong are going to be they're not going to be close. They're going to be either wrong way or they're going to be totally irrelevant. So, you know, because if in your head you're coming up with like, well, how do we know they don't already have like landline phones and stuff? If you're coming up with stuff like that, then you can be reassured by just how wrong the other choices are, because the other choices will be very, very wrong. So, like B, okay. B says there's currently no landline service, which, in fact, helps this plan. I mean, if anything, it would kind of go hand in hand with what they're saying, but we don't really know, because we don't know that phones would do anything. I mean, if you think about this, landline companies don't think they can make their money back. Well, why not? I mean, because there's not really a direct relationship anyway, so that's the first problem with this choice. There's no direct relationship. But what's worse here is that landline phones are presented with the same situation and have chosen not to pursue that. So, like, I mean, this means that landline phone companies, when presented with the same situation, have concluded that it will not be profitable. So, I mean, there are differences between landlines and cell phones, but at the same time, they're both telecommunications. So, and I mean, this would mean that, you know, like the single other product that is closest to a cell phone, which is a landline phone, the company went in there and did a bunch of market research and concluded, like, nope, this is not happening. So that if that has an effect, it's definitely not a good one. You know, it definitely makes it, if it's going to point in any direction, it's going to point in the direction of, well, gee, this doesn't look good. It's going to point in the direction of this looks bad. So it's either neutral or bad. C is the other choice that lots of people picked. A cellular phone company can break even with a smaller number of subscribers, even in areas such as the coast, blah, 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 blah. So the problem with C is that we all have already been given the situation, and we've already been given the fact that it's not profitable right now. So, I mean, C is saying that maybe the situation would be even worse if you were trying to install a landline or something, but this doesn't make the given information any less, right? Like we already know it's a negative profit right now. It's a losing proposition right now. I mean, it's kind of, they do this a lot with these choices. Like they'll give you these choices that are like, oh, in general, this kind of thing is more likely to be X, but the passage has already told you that it's not X. You know, I mean, it's kind of okay. Like for example, my dad is like 6'4" and I'm about 5'10", and I mean, I'm kind of short for someone with a dad as tall as that. I mean, you know, if someone is like, oh, dude, like guys whose dads are 6'4" are usually over 6 feet tall. I mean, I'm still 5'10". If somebody tells you that, it doesn't make me less likely to be 5'10". Right? Same kind of thing here, right? This is currently a negative profit situation. And if they tell you that, well, it's easier to break even, well, they're still not breaking even, so no one cares, right? This is a data point that is currently a negative profit, period. They told you that. And so the fact that a general trend seems to go another direction, well, tough nuts, they already told you that it doesn't go that way. So there's also that, yeah, the comparison there doesn't really seem to help because we're not, that's another issue at C as well, is that comparing against the landline company doesn't seem to accomplish much in this problem because we're not deciding between cell phone and landline offerings. We're trying to decide between offering cell service and offering nothing. So that's also a good point that you make, which is that the comparison is also irrelevant. It's a good point. Yep. Choice D is that the monthly fees are based on this. That's great, but we know they can't afford them, so it doesn't really matter how they calculate it. You know, how the fees are calculated exactly doesn't matter because we already know that they're not affordable. Let's see. I mean, okay. Again, I think you're trying to make rules again, Ashton, and that's not a good idea. I mean, like for example, if you had something like B, like if you had something like B that went the other way, like if you had the landline companies did this analysis and found that they could be profitable, and then you also had fact C, then those would be very relevant, right? Because then if you had both of those, then that would be looking really good for your cell service. If you knew that landlines could make a profit and you knew that cell phones were even easier to make a profit than landlines, then combining those, right? In general, there's no point in trying to make rules about what's relevant, what's not relevant. You should just think about whether things are relevant or not. It's going to be a lot less taxing and a lot more accurate than trying to make rules for that. Well, breaking even is where you have to get before you become profitable. So by any definition, right, that's not a reason to ignore something. That's not a reason to ignore something entirely. Yeah, because you do have to hit the break-even point before you reach profitability. So that doesn't make something totally. I mean, trying to make rules is impossible. I mean, it is actually impossible to do that. Notice I didn't say really hard and I didn't say challenging. I actually said impossible. Like, you can't do it. If you try to do it, you will fail. I mean, you can try, but it's not going to work. Because there is this big effort to try to do that. It's called artificial intelligence. And no one has ever been able to do it. I mean, people have spent decades and decades and trillions of dollars trying to do that, but nobody has ever even sort of succeeded at that. I mean, people can't even make rules for how, like, 3-year-olds think, much less for actual complicated human reasoning. So it's just, there's no way you're going to be able to do it. I mean, if you like trying to do impossible things, you can try it, but it's not going to work. So that said, I mean, the best way to get sharper at figuring out like what's relevant and what isn't relevant and stuff like that is to personalize the situations more. I like to think of them as situations in which you are personally involved or conversations that you are personally having or things like that. Because, you know, like anytime people are personally involved in stuff, they are marvelously good at understanding exactly when things are relevant and exactly when they are not relevant. I mean, they just are, right? Like people, even if there's like 1,000 million steps of reasoning, people are still really good at that. You know, like even people who are not particularly smart in the like nerdy test taking sense of being smart. I mean, you know, like if you have to park your car on the street here in downtown LA, then you know if you know there's going to be a big playoff game or something at the Staples Center, you might be like, oh, well, there's a game and these streets that are next to the stadium get filled up, which means those cars spill over onto those streets. And then those cars will spill over to these parking lots, and these parking lots will raise their prices. It means people will go park on these streets, but I can't park on these streets during these days of the week. Oh, hey, I have to move my car to those streets. I think that process right there is 1,000 times more complicated than anything on a GMAT. But people can do it. I mean, anyone who thinks about moving their car on a crowded event day can do it because that's a personal situation and people are involved in it, and people are not thinking about it as a test thing they have to study for, and that's the key. So it's really getting this to be that sort of thing where you think of it as real life and not as some weirdo abstract test that you're taking. But but the more rules you try to memorize, the worse you're going to get at this, because the farther away you're going to get from any sort of intuitive processing of any of it. But, okay. This. So the rest of these choices, choice E, Calix has for years made a profit on this. Well, that doesn't tell us anything from the coastal region because it's not in the coastal region, and these areas are still isolated. So this doesn't tell us about that. So we've got correct answer, either irrelevant or wrong way. Irrelevant, irrelevant, irrelevant. And that's the point you want to try to get to when you review these things. It needs to be black, white, 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 white. Okay, looking at A, if the general word was less than majority. I mean, if you have to nitpick words like that, then you're also kind of barking up the wrong tree. I mean, remember that in all of these problems, you're going to have one answer choice that is black and 4 answer choices that are white. It's not going to come down to nitpicking quantitative words as to whether they mean 50% or not. I mean, even if this wasn't strictly 50%, I mean, it would still push the thing in the right direction. I mean, you would still have, yeah, some sort of contrast. You want to think about it as green and purple, you can too. I mean, you know, even if this is only some plurality, if it's 30% or whatever, it's still a significant effect in the right direction. I mean, it's still some giant chunk of bidders with which these farmers could suddenly be in contact. So it would still be a strong push in the correct direction, as opposed to the 4 incorrect answers, which don't push in the correct direction at all. So, I mean, that's how these problems are going to work. They do have to be, because they deal in, you know, real world sort of common sense reasoning, the trade-off for that is that there's no shades of gray in the correct versus incorrect spectrum. I mean, you will have black, white, 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 just so there's never any chance of ambiguity in these problems. They do a good job of that. So if your understanding of the problem and the correct answer boils down to like nitpicking quantitative words, then some more reasoning is in order, or some more review is in order, so you get to the point where you actually do perceive the choices as black, white, 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 white. But yeah, okay. I mean, even if you don't perceive the correct answer as perfect, it should still be the only answer choice that goes in the right direction at all. So you should have 4 answer choices that do not go in the right direction, and then one that does. So there you go. Okay, we are just about running up on the time limit. Cool. Let's do it. Let's take a break. Let's break off here. I may turn it off. This is the good afternoon, good evening, good luck point. Thanks for coming. That was some good discussion there, Dan. Like one problem left in the deck, but we got a break here. So thank you. We're probably going to do some more quant next time, but we'll see. I guess it depends on submissions. It also depends on what I kind of feel like doing, just sort of randomly. But all right, see you in 5 minutes. What's happening in 5 minutes? I don't know what I don't know what you're talking about, but okay. In any case, I'm gonna turn off the recording. Thank you guys. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good luck, and